Welcome to our weekly national news conference. I'm Sandy Close, Director of Ethnic Media Services. The pandemic brought home the perils of being trapped in the digital divide. Just how much access to the internet has become a key determinant for education, healthcare, work, even public safety. Today's briefing focuses on efforts to close the digital divide and the growing demand for universal broadband as a fundamental human right. We welcome two expert advocates in the field, Angela Stafer, Executive Director of the National Digital Inclusion Alliance, and Sunny McPeak, President and CEO of the California Emerging Technology Fund. Two speakers will provide personal testimony about being on the wrong side of the digital divide. Michelle Flores, a college student, and Erica Del Toro, who runs a parent university program. Thank you so much for speaking to us today. We ask you to speak slowly, as I'm trying to do, for our interpreters. We invite reporters to enter questions in the chat box. We will moderate a Q&A session with our speakers after their presentations. We will send a video of today's briefing and expanded bios of the speakers and any collateral information after today's call. Now, I'm really pleased to turn the conference over to today's moderator and briefing co-coordinator, author, and journalist, Pilar Marrero. Thanks, Pilar.
Thank you, Sandy. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for being here today. This is a topic that we had not touched on in the past, but that it became really obvious was a huge problem, especially during the pandemic. So we want to talk about things that are going on in a push to move towards this universal broadband that is sorely needed. Our first speaker is going to give us more of the national overview of what's happening, and that is Angela Stafer, Executive Director of the National Digital Inclusion Alliance. Welcome, Angela.
Thank you, Pilar. Thank you, Sandy, for having me. Angela Stafer, Executive Director, National Digital Inclusion Alliance. I have a very bad habit of talking quickly, so you all should make faces at me when I start doing it so that I'll slow down. I'm in Columbus, Ohio.
The interpreters will tell us.
Right. Yeah.
We'll scream at me.
So I'm in Columbus, Ohio. I'm very thrilled to be joining you all today. NDIA is a national organization. We've been doing this work about 7 years. We are a unified voice for digital inclusion around the country. One of the first things we did when we started NDIA was to create definitions for digital equity and digital inclusion. Digital equity is the goal. This is individuals, communities having full access to information communication technologies to do whatever they need to do. And then digital inclusion is the how. These are the activities that would get us to the digital equity. Digital inclusion work in the United States has been very local. It's a grassroots kind of activity, for most part because there hasn't been any money for this. There was nobody to tell you what to do if there was no money for it. So that means it really developed from the ground. And those activities are affordable home broadband. So sometimes this means paying for somebody's internet service. Sometimes it means negotiating for lower rates. Sometimes it means building something that's cheaper. It also means affordable devices in the home, right? And that meet your needs. A lot of times the lower income household will only have a mobile device, and that is insufficient today. And it also means digital literacy skills and training. So being able to go somewhere to receive that support that you need to build your skills, and having somebody to turn to when you have a question. During the pandemic, we saw more organizations doing digital inclusion work or starting to do it than ever before. And we saw a shift in not only providing in-person class types of trainings to households and individuals that needed digital literacy support, but providing it on the phone, online, not always in a class environment. Also, there's been more one-on-one kind of support. The work that CETF does, and that you'll hear about briefly or shortly, and then the work that NDIA does is both that on the ground, helping those practitioners talk to each other and receive that kind of peer-to-peer sharing of best practices that we all need, but then also taking what we hear from folks locally and influencing public policy. And right now, as you would expect, since there are so many more folks who recognize and understand the digital divide than ever before, we actually have some attention amongst policymakers, and that is incredibly exciting for folks who've been doing this work for years. The exciting part is that in this infrastructure package, we do expect there to be, let's all assume the infrastructure package actually happens. So if it happens, there will be money for digital equity work, and that will be incredible. What we know for sure is that digital equity work happens locally, and it happens by trusted institutions. So if the organization that's providing the support that guides someone to choosing a low cost offer, to helping them get a device, to teaching them digital literacy or pointing them to digital literacy resources, if that voice isn't trusted, sometimes the person that an organization is trying to reach just says no and turns around and walks away. And so that trust is really essential. And I think that's part of how and why we're seeing more organizations who do other work, right? They work on housing, they work on new resident kind of programs. We see those organizations starting to do digital equity work, and they're doing it because they can't meet their original mission. So say their original mission is housing, and they couldn't meet that original mission during the pandemic because they couldn't talk to and interact with the populations that they wanted to be interacting with. And that has caused a fabulous widening of who it is that does this kind of work. And that's also super important because of this trust factor that I've mentioned. Technology is intimidating, it's confusing. The government right now has a subsidy for internet service, and we're hearing of some folks saying, no, I don't want it. Why? Well, it sounds like a scam. Doesn't free internet sound like a scam, right? You're like, no, that must be a scam. But then also, do you trust the internet service provider? Privacy, safety concerns, all kinds of reasons why someone who's eligible would say no to something that's free. Is it less than what I actually need, for example? So having these trusted institutions be engaged in the work is super important. It's essentially the human side to the digital divide. So what we're seeing in Congress right now is this recognition, right? So if we get the infrastructure package, broadband's definitely in it. There's no longer any question as to whether or not broadband is part of infrastructure. You all have heard some of the stories about what is infrastructure, right? So they've definitely nailed down broadband itself. The technology is considered infrastructure. So if there's an infrastructure bill that gets passed, broadband is definitely inside of it. We also know that inside that language for broadband is $2.75 billion for the Digital Equity Act. So the contents of the Digital Equity Act are inside the broadband portion of the infrastructure bill that's not actually out yet. So inside that Digital Equity Act is funds for states to conduct digital equity planning. That's incredible. States have not done digital equity planning. Some of them have digital equity plans as part of their broadband plans, but nobody has a standalone plan yet. Wisconsin has a fabulous start, and it might even, have most of the pieces, but we don't know if anyone else who's really has been able to dive into it at that depth. And then it has money for implementation of those state plans. That's amazing too, right? And then there's a separate pot where there's money that it's competitive national grants for this kind of work. All of that is incredible. And that is on top of possible additional money that would extend the emergency broadband benefit. So quick note about the emergency broadband benefit. It's currently at a $50 subsidy per month for broadband service. There's an eligibility list. Right now, it's pretty broad because it's anybody who's been impacted economically by the pandemic. If a household's already using the Lifeline service that's run by the FCC, that makes them automatically eligible. So it is a really valuable subsidy that's out there. We don't know how long it will last because we don't know when the money will run out. But if this extension occurs, it's going to last a lot longer. So I think what we're seeing right now is that potential money from the federal government, but also previous stimulus packages already allow for the monies that go to the state and local governments to be spent on digital equity. And that was a huge win because we haven't really seen that in the past, where money that's kind of has a broad category, it was the digital equity was included in that. So for those who are doing digital equity work on the ground, I encourage them to talk to local and state governments because those local and state governments have access to funding right now from the American Rescue Plan. And there's no reason not to ask for some of that money to continue this work. Okay, Pilar, I'm handing it back to you.
Okay, thank you, Angela. Can you give our reporters the idea of how bad the problem is, and what are the areas of the country that have the highest rate of, I don't know, unconnected people? I don't know how you call it.
Yeah, no, this is a really good clarification. Thank you, Pilar, for the question. That the reasons that someone might not have internet in their home, one reason is that the infrastructure doesn't exist, right? It's just not there. Your only option might be satellite, and that is crazy expensive and unreliable. But then the next reason that you may not have internet in your home is that it's expensive. The infrastructure might exist, but you're like, look, I'm not paying $70 a month. That is just not in the budget. And then another reason you may not have it in your home is that it might be there and maybe you can afford it, but you're not sure how to use it, or you're not sure you trust it, security, privacy concerns, right? All kinds of reasons when folks would be like, not doing it. So there's a multitude of reasons. And sometimes that availability question of whether it's there kind of gets confused with, well, it's there, but people aren't signing up for it. Prior to the pandemic, we knew that that this was happening, but a lot of policymakers were not aware of that. They just assumed that it was only a rural problem. This is not just a rural problem. This is a rural, urban, suburban, tribal. This is everybody. And the reason it's everybody is because the infrastructure might be there, but it might not meet the needs of the population that's there, or they may not be able to afford it, or they may not know how to use it. So we need to address all of those barriers, and it won't surprise folks to hear, this issue is very much connected to poverty. So the lower one's income, the less likely one is to have an internet connection in one's home.
In terms of numbers, is there, we reporters like numbers. So.
Yeah. So the numbers we have are from the US Census prior to the pandemic. So take that for
maybe worse now.
It's probably not worse. It might actually be slightly better because there was a lot of efforts to get people connected at the height of when kids were going back to school and school was online. So prior to the pandemic, 36 million US households do not have an internet connection in their homes. So be very careful. I'm not saying that they don't have it available. I'm saying they don't have an internet connection in the home. And when I say that, I mean wireline connection, and the word wireline means cable, DSL, or fiber. So mobile phones, I don't even want to count mobile phones because they all come with data plans. How can you rely upon a source of internet that has a data cap on it, right? So 36 million US households, nothing. Of those 36 million US households, 26 million are urban, 10 million are rural. So all of these households are important. I don't want to dismiss the availability issue. It is really important, but also want to really confirm this is the bigger number piece of this is urban.
And yet I don't see a lot of talk about this. People talk about the rural, areas don't have the availability of the infrastructure, but then so many people in our cities don't have access to this. Talk a little bit about how the pandemic may have helped open up a little bit.
It definitely drew attention to the issue. When there were news stories showing kids doing their homework in a Taco Bell parking lot, how does that not break anyone's heart, right? Seeing kids do homework in a parking lot, in a car, not in a car, still, it's a parking lot. It is not the best place to be learning. So I think that reality drew lots of folks to the issue. And there's a greater understanding that it's not just an availability of the infrastructure issue, but we still encounter individuals who think that the problem is really about rural availability. And we want to make sure to clarify, yes, there's a problem with rural availability, but there's also a significant problem with affordability, being able to afford that internet service and having the support to learn digital skills in order to be able to make full use of it. And so that education issue is not the only reason the internet's important, but what the pandemic did was the education of young people not being able to go to school that drew attention. And then we're able to expand from there and say, oh, it's also about work. It's also about health. It's about connecting to your families. It's really everything, right? Survive today without it? No.
We have a question from Araceli Martinez. Araceli, from La Opinión.
Hello. I was trying to find out if you have numbers for California and how impacted is the Latino community.
Yes, I will leave that to Sunny because Sunny is your California representative. And I should note to you all how fortunate California is to have California Emerging Technology Fund. No other state has an organization like CETF. So you all, I know not all of you are in California, but those who are, you have an organization to turn to for all that specific data and specific understanding of what's going on in California. No other state has a CETF.
Thank you. Seema Gupta, you wanted to ask a question? Seema
So
Gupta.
my question was basically just a comment that I had was, she said that cable internet versus mobile internet is not considered as a solid source of internet because it has data caps, but so does cable internet. So why is there any difference? As long as somebody is connected to the internet, it does not matter whether it's cable or mobile.
Yes, that's a great question. So the cable sometimes has data caps, but not always. And the mobile tends to have data caps more quickly than you would hit your cap on cable.
So
right? So
cable always has data caps if it is a lower ended plan. The only data cap is doesn't have is on fiber and above.
But remember, there's a lot of cable companies across the United States. So that policy really varies depending upon who your cable company is.
Okay.
Okay, one more question. Joe Garbanzos, you want to ask a question?
Unmute. So thank you very much. This is a terrific session, a comment and a question. Thank you for mentioning the emergency broadband benefit. That's a timely program, and there's not a whole lot of participation. I think the more we can promote it, the better, so people understand what it is and the value of a subsidy, because that money is not going to be there forever. The question is to our speaker, Angela. The broadband issue is, as you know, pretty dense, right? Because you have affordability, but at the end of the day, the question is fiber optics in terms of getting people to access better speed, higher speed, because a lot of people are using this for health, education, and entertainment. So the way it's set up right now, you have monopoly at the last mile, where the cable companies are not investing in upping the bandwidth to have access to more robust information, if you will. My question is your organization weighing in on that? And are you open to collaborating with other organizations, perhaps? Because there is synergy in number, That's the question. Thank you.
We are, and we were supportive of the bill that recently passed. I assume Sunny will talk about this. The bill that recently passed in California. So you all, like, again, sorry for anybody who's not from California on this call. The ones who are from California, there's a lot happening in California. And I'll let Sunny get into the details of that bill. But yes, we are supportive of faster, more robust, affordable internet. There are lots of partner organizations out there who are working on the idea that lots of populations do not have access to the robust internet service that they need. Our particular view of all of it is to really think about our most vulnerable populations and to keep pressing the fact that when those new networks are built, they need to be affordable. And affordable at a market rate is not the same as affordable for a low-income family. So with networks that currently exist and new networks being built, we need to make sure that it's affordable at a market rate, but also that there are subsidies, or that internet service provider cuts that price down to $10, $15 a month, right? Something that is much more reasonable than whatever the market rate, because the possibility of a market rate getting that low, kind of thin, right? Because you got to pay for the broadband itself. So yes, we're hugely supportive of the idea that we need to make sure that we have the most robust internet that there is. And
Thank you, Angela.
to plan for the future, right? Like, we can't build networks for yesterday, because we know that technology is going to keep changing and our needs for that are just going to keep increasing.
Thank you, Angela. I'm going to move on to our second speaker. If you can stick around, that would be great. We may have more questions for you in a little bit. Thank you so much. And now I'm going to welcome Sunny McPeak, President and CEO of the California Emerging Technology Fund. So happy to have you with us, Sunny.
Thank you, Pilar. Thank you, Sandy, for making the connection again. We are delighted at the California Emerging Technology Fund to be working with you and supporting your work with the ethnic media experts that are on this call. The California Emerging Technology Fund is a pretty unique animal, as you heard from Angela Seifer, and we are just delighted to also work with Angela under her national leadership and the National Digital Inclusion Alliance. So what a great treat to be here with you, Angela, and with Sandy and Pilar. I do want to acknowledge that I have a pretty impressive team of folks with me from the California Emerging Technology Fund, but we are insanely lean. So I think I've got a third of our team is actually here helping today, and want to just make sure you know who they are. Many of you already know them. Our Senior Vice President, Susan Walters, is here. Susan has been with CETF from the day that we stood up the organization. Our communications program manager, associate Nadine Hug. We have had the advice of Marianne Ostrom, a veteran journalist, as our communications advisor. And then our distinguished registered representative in Sacramento is the Honorable Richard Polanco. We call him Senator Polanco because he finished his career in the legislature and the Senate, although he also served in the Assembly. And it was Senator Polanco who connected Pilar to CETF. I don't even think you knew, Pilar, that Sandy and we had been a part of working together previously. For everyone who may not know the background of Senator Polanco, he also was the founder of the Latino Caucus in the state legislature. So with that, let me try to give you the perspective of the California Emerging Technology Fund and a little bit of background, because it will provide context for the information that you want me to share. CETF was directed to be established by the California Public Utilities Commission in 2005 as a public benefit out of mergers. In that year, SBC was buying AT&T. They kept the name AT&T, and Verizon was buying MCI. It was the California Public Utilities Commission who envisioned this concept of a not-for-profit statewide organization with the mission to close the digital divide in California. I should add that that also had been legislation introduced by one of our founding directors on our board, the Honorable Martha Escutia, who also served in the Assembly and the Senate. So Senator Escutia, who now works for the University of Southern California, is on our board as well. And she had introduced legislation that hadn't passed. So CETF is a nonprofit, but with this mission that comes from government. And there are two statutes that actually also are fairly unique as it pertains to a not-for-profit. CETF is required by law to report to the legislature annually. So there is an extraordinary reporting responsibility to the public and therefore scrutiny, which we actually think is appropriate and actually welcomed. And secondly, by statute, CETF is the only non-state agency member of the California Broadband Council. So with that background, when we were given the mission and had to figure out what to do to close the digital divide in California, we looked at all of the existing work and studies, determined that, as Joe said, broadband is pretty dense and it is very complicated if you don't unpack it in a way that at least this farm girl can understand. So we talk about sort of two sides of the equation. One is on the infrastructure supply side that we call deployment. Building the infrastructure that is necessary is the deployment part of the digital inclusion to achieve digital equity equation. So Angela has those definitions absolutely perfect, which is why we appreciate working with NDIA. On the demand side, if you will, on the consumer side, on the delivery of the connection into a home for everyone, we call that adoption. Being able to adopt the technology, to use the technology at home to improve your life, to save time and money. And so that demand, supplies, deployment, adoption, tension is very important in public policy. And I start there so that all of you who write about it can also sort of unpack it. Infrastructure is necessary, but not sufficient to get everybody online. And it doesn't make any difference if we build the best network in the world if we don't get everyone online and achieve digital equity. So for more than a decade, CETF has called digital access a 21st century civil right. The United Nations, as Sandy referenced, refers to it as a human right. To us, those are synonymous. We use the term a civil right because there has to be an understanding about justice, economic justice, opportunity, and that is what is the imperative as we go about our work. The digital divide is literally just another manifestation of the economic divide, of the opportunity divide, and that is rooted in systemic racism. If we don't understand fully the genesis of the digital divide, we're not going to have as robust and as effective a solution as quickly as we need it for everyone. And that's why I share that lens with you. We also view technology as just a tool. It's a very powerful tool. It's an empowering tool, but it is only a tool. So it makes sense to people if it is something they can use in their daily lives for a job, for education, for healthcare, for public safety. for being able to be connected culturally to your family, your country, your tribal lands. And it's that understanding about the adoption side that's really important for the implementers of programs that are digital literacy or outreach to recognize they must work through trusted messengers. I assure you, no mainstream internet service provider is a trusted messenger. Many of them have come to recognize the digital divide, to speak about it, but until they are in sincere partnerships at the community level to do the outreach, we're not going to get to those who are most digitally disadvantaged. In a moment, I'm going to put up some data to respond to Araceli, your question about California numbers, but I want to just build on what Angela said. We do track very regularly in a statewide survey who in California is connected and who isn't, and how are they connected. So today we have about 91% of Californians connected at home. Very good, a very good number. And I'm going to show you that data and the change. But we also have within that a 6% who are connected by a smartphone only, which is truly an underconnected household, particularly if you have children in school or trying to do workforce preparation to work from home. You actually do need a keyboard these days. Perhaps with that, maybe we go to the slides, Pilar, that I can share with you. I will say in the first decade that California Emerging Technology Fund existed, we worked with more than 100 community-based organizations throughout the state. Susan led all that work. We were able through those CBO grantees to train more than 820,000 individuals with digital literacy. And we were able to get more than 274,000 low-income households that were previously unconnected, connected to the internet. They were doing
Sunny,
so.
excuse me, did you want us to share the slides?
Yes, yes, I thought you were going to. Yes, yes.
No, I thought you were going to.
I thought
just gave
maybe,
us a
okay.
copy.
Sorry, Pilar. I'm also trying to.
So you have them?
Do I have them? Nadine, can you share them? Yes, she will put them up.
Nadine can share them. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
I am also intentionally speaking slowly, but if you want me to speed up, you can also give me that signal in chat. While the slides are coming up, I want to underscore, here we go. We have done a statewide survey for 14 years, and we've had 4 different independent research partners. We had PPIC, Public Policy Institute of California, then the Field Research Corporation, then University of California, Berkeley, and now University of Southern California. And I want to give great recognition to Dr. Hernan Galpin, who at the Annenberg School for Journalism and Communications headed the team. We did this in March. If you'll go to the next slide, we do random digit dialing. So we reach everybody, and we do a 90% sample with cell phones, by cell phone, so that we are not limiting the participation in the slide, and it is conducted in 5 languages. You can see the bars that show really steady progress from on the left in each of those groupings of the dark blue, what was the baseline in 2008, when California's adoption rate was the same as the nation, overall 55%, but clearly a real divide, which is expressed in the 3 groups that are the most digitally Latino households, particularly families who speak Spanish primarily at home, and then people with disabilities. Our goal in the first decade was to get everybody statewide up to 80% adoption, and we got way past that, and to have no one population group more than 10% out of that average, i.e. below 70. We also made that, but that only happened because we focused on and targeted digitally disadvantaged residents. The good news today, as I said, is that we have now 91% of the California population does report that they're connected at home. 6% of that is by a smartphone only. So 15% of the California population is digitally disadvantaged, and that's 6 million people. No state has more low-income people than California. 15% of our population is low income. California also has some of the most challenging terrain, is more geographically and geologically diverse than most states. And so it's also difficult for deployment. If we go to the next slide, this also goes directly to Araceli's question, which is those individuals who are Spanish speaking at home, as you can see, 25% are not connected at all, another 10% only by a smartphone. So as you read this graph, it takes the very same data and it expresses it longitudinally, well, actually horizontally, I should say. And the red are those who are not connected, and the golden or goldenrod are those who are, we call underconnected, a smartphone only, and then the green is those who are connected. And clearly, by ethnicity, there is a huge difference, and we refer to this, and particularly the experience during the pandemic, where it was essential, if you were going to participate in the world, to be connected from home, that not only spotlighted the digital divide, but it revealed a digital cliff with people falling off into deeper poverty and greater isolation. And so the next slide is by income. I will repeat what I said before. The digital divide or the digital cliff is a manifestation of the economic divide, the economic challenges faced by residents in low-income communities. The interrelationship of factors, forces, actually constitute what we call a wall of poverty, and it takes extraordinary intervention to overcome that, and all of that is a reflection of systemic racism. The last slide we're going to share with you is one in which the question is often asked. So once you have access to the infrastructure, and clearly the majority of digitally disadvantaged residents are in urban areas. They are in low income, high poverty neighborhoods that are urban. We care about both urban poor and rural, remote, unserved, particularly in California, all our tribal lands. California has more Native Americans residing in our state than any other state. There are 109 federally recognized tribes in California. And of course, we have a very, very diverse population, benefit from a lot of immigrants who come here speaking the language of their home country, and therefore also are digitally disadvantaged as they begin to try to participate in the California economy and get connected. The primary barrier, once infrastructure is available, is affordability, too expensive. So with that, I'm going to close. I do want to say, as you listen to the other speakers, that we at the California Emerging Technology Fund have focused on the importance of community and ethnic media. We've talked about, had questions regarding the emergency broadband benefit program or other affordable offers. We think that the internet service providers should be advertising with all of you, should be reaching out to all of you, should be connecting with you. We want to ask you to join us in that effort. We've got a very, very good firm that is woman and minority owned in Los Santos, SASH, who will help all of you. And I think we want to join forces and let's get the word out, because if we do, as Joe said, a united voice will actually bring action much more quickly. Thank you, Pilar. Thank you, Sandy. We are so delighted. And as Nadine is saying to everybody, all of our data is online at our website, including the rest of the survey, statewide survey on broadband adoption.
Thank you, Sunny. That was a very interesting presentation, very complete. And I'm sure it will be very interesting to see the numbers in other states, given that California is better off in comparison to many other places in the country. But I just have one question before we move on to our two guests who are gonna just give us more of the testimonial of what happens in the community when there's no connectivity, and as opposed to when there is. How do we make people accountable? In particular, people, I mean corporations. How do we make the corporations accountable? In particular, the internet service providers.
First of all, we ask our legislators, our elected representatives in each of your states and in Congress, to make sure all the legislation they pass requires public reporting. There should be public reporting on how much progress are the ISPs making in signing up everybody for EBB, as an example. The second is, together we approach them and ask them, and then you keep writing about it. If you ask them a question and they won't tell you the answer, please report that. Let's join with NDIA in talking about if we're going to achieve digital equity, and that funding is within the $65 billion, which is real money, I will say, CETF advocated for, and President Biden accepted the number of 100 billion. So, okay, we went from 100 billion down to 65, but we still have a lot of dollars to work with. That's how we hold them accountable. But that's why you all need to reach out to them and ask, what are they doing to work with community organizations in your particular interest or area? Have them answer questions in your media about who they're signing up, and let's just get this out in the public.
Thank you. I apologize. My my headphones just turned off for some reason. If you hear an echo, I am so sorry. I'm just going to move on to Michelle Flores. She's a tutor, and she also went through what it was like to study, to go to school without access to broadband. Michelle, can you give us your views on this?
Of course, and thank you for having me. So hi, my name is Michelle Flores, and I am currently 19 years old. I am a freshman at Santa Monica College, and I'm also working as a tutor for Southeast Community Development Corporation, which is here in Los Angeles. And SCDC has been a long time grantee of SETF, and has helped prepare students and adults for a digital world through training and accessing computers and affordable internet at home. And I currently live with my family, and since the pandemic, I've had to use hotspot to get home, internet access to attend school, and to also do my job. And sometimes there wasn't enough bandwidth for all this activity, along with a lot of other families that have experienced this. They had the same struggle, and they also needed access for better internet at an affordable price. And during the pandemic, I have been doing online tutoring from students that are grades 2 to 5th grade. And I started to notice that some of the students that I had, they weren't able to participate because they didn't have access to internet at home, or they would get kicked off of the Zoom call because of their internet service, that it was hard for them to learn and to be able to help them through this time. So SCDC stepped in to help them by getting them internet access along with the computer. And as members of the media, it is very important for you guys to tell the story about how important digital skills are and how our community can help to find affordable home internet and computers as well. So internet access isn't just something that's nice to have, but it's also the difference between like missing our class or not being able to find a good job and simply just missing out on opportunities that we can have access to with internet.
Thank you, Michelle. Thank you so much for that. And let's hear from Erica del Toro before we move on to a few questions that we have. She runs a parent university program at Cal State Fresno. Erica, tell us how important internet access and literacy is for parents.
Hello, everyone. And again, thank you for having me. My name is Erica Del Toro. I'm part of the Parent University program through Fresno State University. Part of what we do and our goal is to be able to offer the opportunity for parents to have those computer skills. We also help them with financial management skills. And now with the pandemic, we added on social and emotional support. As you guys can imagine, with the pandemic, school systems were, greatly impacted by that, which means our program need was, through the roof. We had a lot of school districts reach out to us. So a lot of what was happening with the students being at home, they didn't know how to manage their devices. They didn't know how to use their devices. They weren't familiar with the programs that they had to use now for school. And that means the parents weren't either. So part of what we did during the pandemic was not only help the parents and give them that support with the stressors of having their students struggle at home, but also learn how to use the device themselves. That way they can better help their kids. We also help them, learn those programs that each district had the students use for their schoolwork, how to check their grades and things like that. As part of the social and emotional part, we kind of did kind of like an open, safe environment for parents. Of course, all, confidential and up to them to participate or just listen in, but just to talk about, the stress that they were dealing with this change, as well as the stress that the kids go through, because it also affects them. So we had some parents kind of stress about, how it just gets to the point where it's a little bit too much for them being cooped up at home. So we just kind of worked on with professionals, different ideas, different activities that they can do to kind of step away from just being teacher mode. Because of course, being a parent is, awesome, but then now you're playing teacher as well. So how does that impact you and how to do that? A lot of positive outcomes from those classes we did during the pandemic. A lot of these parents actually continued their education, and they shared that with us that thanks to our program, they were encouraged to now go get their GED and go to college and find those online classes because they lost the fear of being online or touching a computer alone. So that was very interesting and very fulfilling for us as part of our program, because we do want to help parents as a whole with their families, but we also want to encourage them not to forget about themselves, right? And a lot of the issue was internet access, like Suzanne said, low-income homes, Latinos, and a good thing about our program, we do try to accommodate to the communities that we offer our program to. So we do offer our program in different languages, and we do connect them with whatever services are around their area to get that low income opportunity to have internet access or free devices to use.
Thank you, Erica. And we're almost to the end of the conference, and there's a couple of questions in the chat that I think go back to one important issue. Khalil says, broadband deployment in the US has been predicated on privately owned cable companies getting contracts from municipalities for X number of years. Where are the initiatives for public ownership by municipalities and cities? And then from Oni, a small country like Latvia has free internet. It is mind-boggling that the US, one of the wealthiest countries, could not even provide internet, especially to underserved communities. I'm just gonna throw this out to Angela and Sunny. Can the United States actually do this? Can we have more public internet can we have more governments offer internet? Is that doable?
Oh yeah, it's doable and it's happening right now. The link that I shared in the chat is an organization called Institute for Local Self-Reliance, and they maintain a listing of all the local governments and other publicly owned entities that are building and managing their own networks. It's definitely something we've seen more interest in during the pandemic, that the local individuals and elected officials want to solve their problem, and one way they go at solving it is by doing it themselves. There are also more public-private partnerships where they're not doing it all their own, they're doing it with a partner. And in the legislation that we're about to see, it doesn't keep, so right now in some states there are laws that keep those the public entities from using their own funds to build networks, and that's not going to change in this upcoming legislation. But what we are seeing is a welcoming of public entities to apply for the grant funds and to build networks. So it's kind of it's a balance between the incredible power of the internet service providers. So I think those two questions are actually very much related. They have to do with that incredible power of internet service providers in the United States. The base thing to understand is that in the United States, providing internet service is a commodity. It's not a public utility. Nobody has any legal standing. One might say morally it's a utility, but legally it's not a utility, right? But morally it should be. And the reason that it's established like that is because in the United States, those internet service providers have been making so much money that they spend millions of dollars on lobbyists to make sure that their needs are met. And so the pushback from organizations like CETF and NDIA is that we need to think about the communities and the individuals first, not think about the internet service providers first. And in some of the states where laws have been restrictive, it's because they were thinking of the stakeholders as being the internet service providers. We need to change that so that the stakeholders are our communities and our residents, not a corporation. Sunny, do you want to add anything to that?
Oh, I want to underscore the fact that the commitment has to be to the residents, to the people, to all of the customers, if you will, in the country, in any given state. And of course, each nation has their own history. And we also marvel at Latvia and others being able to get high-speed internet infrastructure, throughout their country. California, as I said, is a big damn state with more people and more low-income people and really tough geography. Having said that, we at the California Emerging Technology Fund are always looking for partnerships. We have said to everyone that no one gets a veto on our future. So it is really crazy that any interest group has been given so much pass, so much opportunity to game the system over the years instead of serve the public interest. The internet service providers clearly have been among the top political contributors in California. Having said that, they also have received a lot of subsidies that are from the public government for connecting schools and libraries under something called E-rate of the 1996 Telecommunications Act. And we take the approach that it is first and foremost the responsibility of our government to provide the essential leadership, to bring all of the interest groups to the table and give them the opportunity to be part of the solution. We say either step up or step aside, and we advocate that that be essentially the legal position, which means that if you don't step up as an internet service provider who is licensed to operate in the country or in a state, who has other benefits, then you must step aside and you don't have legal recourse to block others. We also are not anxious to have a whole lot of people get into the business of being an internet service provider who've never done that before. And so we're trying to strike the balance by bringing the public sector at all levels together with the private sector, i.e. the internet service providers. And some of those incumbents are public agencies. In California, the dominant provider that meets the public needs in both Kings County and Imperial County happens to be the County Office of Education. We've got a Plumas Electric Company in the northeast part of California, ANZA Electric in the Inland Empire. So there are some public providers who need to also be given the opportunity if they want to expand. Now, why is that in the public interest? I just want to underscore this. We've all spent a lot of money as either ratepayers or taxpayers paying our bills, and also those companies have been subsidized. I want access to that infrastructure if it can be leveraged in the public interest, because we want every dollar to get to last mile deployment. Actually, in California, the CENIC, the Corporation for Education Network Initiatives in California, that is going to probably be awarded the contract as a third-party administrator for a government-owned middle mile network, calls the last mile the first mile. And I love that terminology. It is back to Angela's focus on the consumer. But that is, I think in our country, we have a history of capitalism. I actually am a fierce capitalist, just nobody gets to veto anybody's future. And I want the competition in capitalism to work in the public interest. That's what we can do with sufficient leadership from the public sector.
Thank you, Sana. I have a quick question for Erica and Michelle. I'm wondering, in your experience, how many kids quit school because they don't have access to internet? Michelle, maybe you have something to say.
Of course, yes. So during my sessions for tutoring, we did have a couple of students that, because of this issue, they just couldn't attend anymore. And so luckily with SCDC, they were able to help them in any way that they could, and every way possible, to give them that internet access along with that computer. So we did have a few students that, because of that issue, they were not able to attend anymore.
Erica?
On my end, a lot of my parents expressed, especially those going into college, starting, with the pandemic and everything online, they were choosing to wait. And then as far as the ones who were currently transitioned to being at home, doing online school, their grades went down. It took a lot of asking the districts to offer some kind of tutoring service, or some kind of guidance, some kind of help, because even just one-on-one opportunities with the teachers was very limited. So it came down really to a lot of the parents turning into that teacher mode, and understanding that, it just depends on what the districts were able to offer. It was a change for everybody. So definitely grades were impacted, and definitely a change of mind for those starting college for the first year.
And if I might add to what Michelle and Erica have just said, even if the student didn't quit, they were unconnected because they couldn't sustain a connection. They were literally, if you will, missing in action, not because they wanted to be, but because even if they had a hotspot from the school, if the underlying infrastructure wasn't sufficient or robust enough, they couldn't continue the connection to remain in class. So in some school districts, there would be 25–30% of the students just did not get connected for their classes. That is a shame. We've got learning loss now that we also have to make up for, in addition to all of the challenges of schools that are located in low-income communities.
I was going to toss to Sandy to close the call, but there's a very good question by Nora Estrada, and she asked me to ask it from you. She says that there are many streaming services that are emerging every day that focus on entertainment, movies and series, and obviously we have other things like gaming, right? She says, does that congest the infrastructure?
Oh yes, oh yes. So let's just keep in mind, I know Angela knows this probably even better than I do, but in California, nobody anticipated networks that had to support 13 million households online simultaneously, let alone 2 or 3 kids going to 3 different classes with different devices have been issued by different schools, and then other people wanting to downstream movies because they've been told stay home. Oh no, every infrastructure technology we know today whether it's wireline or wireless, will have a degradation of speed depending on how many users you have on that end loop. And so, yes, it does. It's sort of a miracle that the entire network didn't collapse. We have sufficient backbone, but there's not sufficient middle mile backhaul. I think that was asked about maybe also earlier by someone, and I just wanted to say, for years we've said all middle mile has to be fiber. Last mile has to be determined on technology that is performance-based. Can it support distance learning? Can it support telehealth? And the most significant growth in bandwidth demand up until the pandemic was actually from streaming, downloading movies. Netflix itself was accounting for a exponential growth of demand in bandwidth that was 20-25% a year. I mean, unbelievable projections you could get from Cisco as to the demand. And that is why also the need for, if you will, two-way communication, PLR, download and uploads, particularly with schools, which you heard from Michelle and Erica, or with telehealth, where you have to have the ability to communicate in both directions, and a physician to see the patient real time, which is an upload to, if you will, the physician or the clinic. And so, yeah, we need to significantly upgrade the capacity, i.e. the speed capacity of networks throughout the entire country.
Thank you so much, Angela, Sonny, Erica, Michelle, and everyone that worked with us on putting this together, Yvette, Nadine, Susan, everyone. I'm sorry if I'm missing someone. Let me toss it to Sandy Close.
Well, I'm thrilled, and I'm thrilled to have this invitation from both these terrific organizations to join forces. Now, that is like sending a love letter because for so many years, we have tried to get, for example, tech companies to even run recruitment advertising in ethnic media. They complain they don't have access to enough diverse applications, but they do no advertising in the media that could get them. And we just thought, I guess I have to say, this opens a window. It is extremely exciting. And the call to action for us is to raise awareness of digital equity as a civil and human right. And I think you all the speakers have done a terrific job elevating that message. Thank you very much. And we accept the invitation to join forces.